So now here we go, decoding Daniel. Oh my goodness, I'm telling you right now, I'm discovering things that is just knocking my socks off. Some of it I can't share till next week or the week after because I'm working way ahead. Mind-blowing. But let's touch for just a minute on what we've already covered. Daniel 1, 2, and 3. Daniel 1 is when Nebuchadnezzar besieges Jerusalem, and he takes the children captive. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah changes their names. Isn't that interesting? A new master wants to change your name. And as we submit to the Messiah, he's going to give us a new name, it says in the book of Revelation. Mine's been Henri, but so I need a new name. Then, Daniel chapter 2 and 3 concerns the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. We have his dream of this image, and everyone's familiar with that. And then the three Hebrew children don't worship the image, and it's the story of the fiery furnace. Then comes Daniel chapter 4. That's what we're going to be covering today, where judgment now falls on Nebuchadnezzar. So let's begin with Daniel chapter 4, verse 1 through 3. It says, after King Nebuchadnezzar sees the three Hebrew children saved, he now is a believer in the God of the Hebrew children. And so it says, King Nebuchadnezzar tells all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs. I think it's so fascinating that here we are in the Torah portion talking about signs, and now we're in Daniel. And Nebuchadnezzar is saying, it seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs! How mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. Now, when we read this, what kind of an attitude do we see that Nebuchadnezzar has? Sounds like he's humbled himself, doesn't it? It's just the opposite. Let me read this to you. I'm going to read this verse again. Same words with a different emphasis. Okay. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all people, nations, languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, his mighty wonders, his kingdom is everlasting. Notice it's, look how God is so special. Look how special I must be that he didn't show this to you. He showed it to me. And so it's amazing. And so he is so filled with pride that God has to now take him down. See, it's kind of fascinating when you look at this. It's like, look what God has done. And how often sometimes the Christians sometimes do the same thing. I must be special. Well, listen to Psalms 73, verse 3 through 9. This is David. And this is Jeremiah. In Jeremiah, if you recall, Jeremiah wants to argue with God. And he says, God, I know you'd win any argument, but I got a question. Why do the wicked prosper? Why do they get planted and the roots go deep and they bear fruit and you allow it? That was Jeremiah's question. Well, David had the same question 500 years earlier. And look what David found out. He says, I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no pangs until death. Their bodies are fat and sleek. They're not in trouble as others are. They're not stricken like the rest of mankind. Therefore, pride is their necklace. Violence covers them as a garment. Their eyes swell out through fatness. Their hearts overflow with follies. They scoff. They speak with malice. Loftily, they threaten oppression. Here, look at this. They set their mouths against the heavens and their tongue struts through the earth. I see that amongst a lot of politicians nowadays. We are now in the 80s, the 57 80s, and 80 is pay, the mouth. This is the decade where God is going to deal with the mouth. Fascinating. Okay, but let's go back to Daniel 4:4-7. Nebuchadnezzar, he's at ease. He's prospering in his palace. What could go wrong? And what does he do? He sees a dream. This is what we just read. And he becomes like a beast, which is what we just read. But he says this, I had a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, the astrologers came in. I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. Now, to understand, they gave him all kinds of interpretations. It's not that they didn't give any interpretation. He was looking for the interpretation. He knew there was a lot of interpretations given, but he knew none of them lined up at all. Now, if you remember, before when Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, he wouldn't tell anyone the dream. But now he tells everyone the dream. But when Daniel comes in, he doesn't require that. And so what do we see? The reason why they say Nebuchadnezzar didn't ask Daniel at first was because Nebuchadnezzar did acknowledge that God was the God over all the earth, but he felt he was over the other gods, over the nations. And so he felt like he didn't want to bother Daniel and the big God if these necromancers who had the local gods could interpret it. All right? But now he realizes no one can interpret it. And so in Daniel 4:8-9, he says, at last Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belteshazzar, after the name of what? My God. Can you imagine? Daniel has to walk around with the name of a god, and it's Nebuchadnezzar's God. But if you'll notice, all through the book of Daniel, he's always called Daniel, whose name was. The only time he's actually called that name is when Nebuchadnezzar is talking directly to him. Otherwise, everywhere in Daniel, he's always known as Daniel, whose name was. But anyway, going on, it says, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods? And so I told him the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, no mystery is too difficult for you. Tell me the visions of my dream that I saw and their interpretation. And so in verse 10-12, Nebuchadnezzar is telling Daniel his dream vision. And he says, the visions of my head as I lay in my bed were these. I saw, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven and was visible to the end of the whole earth. Can you imagine a tree so big? You could see it from the ends of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit were abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade underneath it. The birds of the heavens lived in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. But then look what happens in verse 13-16. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed. He was at ease, see? And behold, there was a watcher, a holy one coming down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said this, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves, scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth and bind the stump, it says, with a band of iron and bronze and amid the tender grass of the field. And then all of a sudden, it transitions from a tree, turning it into a human. All of a sudden, we see it. The tree becomes a human. It says, let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. So the tree goes through a metamorphosis into a human who's now has been bound and has gone loony bins. Totally crazy. And then in 17 and 18, it says, the sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones to the end. Notice everything that God did in the Exodus plagues was in order that, or to the end of. And here this is happening, it says, to the end that the living may know that the Most High is the one who rules in the kingdom of men. And he gives it to whom he will, and sets over it the lowliest of men. Isn't that interesting? Even in our elections, even in everything that goes on in politics all around the world, it says God will give it to whomever he will and will set over it the lowliest of men. And then it says, this dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and you, O Belteshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Okay, so Daniel 4:19. Now Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, he was dismayed. Why was he dismayed? How does he tell Nebuchadnezzar the interpretation of this? I'd be dismayed as well for a while. How do I phrase politically my words? So I got to keep my head on my shoulders. And his thoughts alarmed him. And Nebuchadnezzar could tell he was freaking out. Until the king answered and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation alarm you. And Belteshazzar answers and says, oh, my Lord, may the dream be for those who hate you and its interpretation for your enemies. Okay, he's kind of worried about how is he going to tell Nebuchadnezzar the interpretation of this. So watch his speech. It's very politically correct. In verse 20 through 22, he goes, okay, the tree you saw, which grew and became strong, so that its top reached to heaven, it was visible to the end of the whole earth, whose leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant, and which was food for all, under which beasts of the field found shade, and whose branches the birds of the heavens lived. It's you, O king, who've grown and become strong. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. Wow. As Nebuchadnezzar, score. You're doing good. You're doing good. and then he says, Daniel says in verse 23 and 24, and because, king, you're the one who saw the watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field. Daniel's not going to interpret all of this. He skips some of this, I'll have you know. And he says, let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts of the field till 7 periods of time pass over him. Well, here's how I interpret that, O king. In 24 and 25, he says, it's a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you are going to be driven from men. Your dwelling will be with the beasts of the field. You're going to be made to eat grass like an ox. You'll be wet with the dew of heaven. And 7 periods of time will pass over you till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Now, see, Daniel's trying to keep it positive. In the dream itself, it didn't mention an ox at all. But Daniel brings in an ox. Well, what's interesting about the ox is the king of the herbivores. Okay, he is just like the lion is the king of the jungle. He's an ox. And if you remember, again, the aleph is ox, referring to God. And he says, so you're going to eat grass like an ox. Okay, big and strong. All right. And then in verse 26 and 27, he says, okay, as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, that means your kingdom is confirmed. Okay, from the moment that you know that heaven rules, therefore, he says, O king, let my counsel. So he not only does interpret the dream, he gives him counsel. And he says, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity. Well, guess what happens? A year later, it was postponed for a year. Look at verse 28 through 22. 28 through 32. All this came to King Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. He was walking on the roof of his great house in Babylon. The king made answer and said, "Is this not great Babylon, which I have made for the living place of kings, by the strength of my power and for the glory of my honor?" While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice came down from heaven saying, "Hello, do you hear me now?" He says, "The kingdom is gone from you. They're going to send you out from among men to be with the beasts of the field. They're going to give you grass for your food like the oxen, and 7 times will go by you till you are certain that the Most High is ruler in the kingdom of men. And he's the one who gives it to any man at his pleasure." And then look at verse 33 and 34. It says, at that very hour, the order about Nebuchadnezzar was put into effect. He was sent out from among men and had grass for his food like the ox. And his body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hair became long as eagle's feathers. Remember, eagle is the king of the birds. Okay, so he still is, king. His nails like those of birds. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven and got back my reason. And blessing the Most High, I gave praise and honor to him who is living forever, whose rule is an eternal rule, and whose kingdom goes on from generation to generation. Wow. Isn't that amazing that even Nebuchadnezzar is restored back to his kingdom after he repents? And then look at verse 35 through 37. It says, and all the people of the earth are as nothing, as God does his pleasure in the army of heaven and among the people of the earth. Sometimes we forget, why does God need an army in heaven unless there are wars going on in heaven? You have to remember, we are living in a parallel universe. Okay, just as there's battles raging in heaven, battles are raging on earth. I can't emphasize that enough. When we see things that are going on earth, we need to realize something's going on in the heavens that parallel what's happening here on earth. I'm going to get into that more in just a little bit, and it's going to be, okay, just setting you up here. Okay, and then it goes on, and it says, no one is able to keep back God's hand or say to him, what are you doing? At the same time, my reason came back to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my honor, my great name came back to me, and my wise men and my lords returned to me again. I was made safe in my kingdom and had more power than I had before. He says, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, but you'll notice he doesn't say King Nebuchadnezzar. He just calls himself Nebuchadnezzar. He even takes away the title of king. He says, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, I give worship and praise and honor to the King of heaven, for all his works are true, his ways are right, and those who go in pride, he is able to make low. So the kings on earth, whoever is a king or a president on earth, are representatives of their counterparts in heaven. Remember the prince of Persia that Michael was fighting with? We're going to be looking at in a little bit. Okay, so what is happening among the hosts of heaven is happening here on earth. Okay, so now here's what's happening. Take a look at the next slide. Here we are. Chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 all go together. They're all about Nebuchadnezzar. Now here's what most people don't get. We don't hear from Daniel for almost 70 years now. And then the next 3 chapters all have to do with Belshazzar. So the first 4 chapters all have to do with Nebuchadnezzar. The next 3 chapters all have to do with Belshazzar. And then the next 3 chapters all have to do with Darius the Mede. Okay, so that you put them together by who is reigning. But here's the thing. You can't read this in order. Daniel 7 is where we're going to go now, which is the first year of Belshazzar. Then we go to Daniel 8, which is the third year of Belshazzar. Then we got to jump back to Daniel 5, which is the last year of Belshazzar with the handwriting on the wall. So what we're going to do is jump now into Daniel 7, where he has the vision of the lion, the bear, there's a leopard with 4 wings, and then this monster he can't even describe. And then 2 years later, in the third year of Belshazzar, he has the dream of the ram, the goat, these 4 horns, and a notable horn. But all these all go back again to the initial dream of 70 years earlier concerning Nebuchadnezzar and the image. These are just repeats. Now, why is he having a repeat of those dreams at this time with Daniel 5 with the handwriting on the wall? Okay, well, 70 years earlier, when he's just a teenager, he sees the coming powers. After Babylon comes the Medes and the Persians. Well, guess what? In Daniel 7, 8, and 5, when he has this dream again, he's reminded because now he is at the end. Okay, it's now time for this next vision to take place. And so let's go. This time, Nebuchadnezzar, remember, saw it with an inanimate object of an image. But now, Daniel sees the same dream, but it's with animals. So let's look at Daniel 7, 1 through 3. Here it is now. Nebuchadnezzar is long gone. There's been several other kings of Babylon in the interim, and now we're at Belshazzar. And it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions came into his head on his bed. Then he put the dream in writing. I had a vision by night, and I saw the 4 winds of heaven violently moving the great sea. Here it talks about the 4 winds of heaven. And it says 4 great beasts came up from the sea. They were all different from another. So here I have an image of the great sea, and the great sea represents the nations. All right. And what is he going to see coming up out of the great sea? First, he's going to see a lion. Then he's going to see a bear. Then he's going to see a leopard, all coming out of the great sea. So these are representing the nations. And so let's take a look here. Daniel 7, 13 and 14, I want to jump ahead first. We'll come back to verse 4, but look at this. He also saw in the night visions, and behold, it says, there came with the clouds of heaven one like unto the Son of Man. And he came even to the Ancient of Days, and he was brought near before him. And it says, there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom which will not be destroyed. Okay, so in other words, what's fascinating is all of the nations come up out of the stormy sea, those kingdoms, but God's kingdom comes from the clouds of heaven. It's not coming up from the sea. All right. It's transition time, okay? The Babylonian kingdom is about to end in just a couple of years. And so he's reminding Daniel of the dream of the image and what was happening. Okay, so Daniel 7, verse 4. He says, the first was like a lion, but it had eagle's wings. I was watching, its wings were pulled off. It was lifted up from the earth and placed on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. That refers to Babylon. If you look at this image, here's pictures of ancient Babylon, and they were a lion with wings. That's how Babylon was imagined. Here's even a picture of Nebuchadnezzar as a lion with wings. So Daniel is having a vision of what historically Babylon has always represented. Okay, now, here's something that I found interesting. Nebuchadnezzar, think of him as a politician. He saw in his dream the coming future powers, but they were all in the form of a statue, an inanimate object. Whereas Daniel, who is a man of God, he sees these different coming powers on the level of beasts. that are even lower than humans. Okay? The thing about the nations, they're always referred to as beasts. Why? Because they're always looking downward and never upward toward God. And as part of animate creation, Daniel sees the moral nature of these coming kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar just sees the nature, but Daniel sees their moral capacity. So, as a matter of fact, referring to Babylon as the lion, listen to Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. It says, set up a standard toward Zion, put yourselves under covert, stay not, for I'm going to bring evil from the north and the great destruction. Here it is, a lion, referring to Babylon, has gone up from his thicket. A destroyer of nations is set out, gone from his place to make your land desolate, that the cities may be laid waste without inhabitant. So here we see in Jeremiah's day, which is around 600 BC, Babylon is compared to a lion. Okay, just like in Daniel's dream. But do you know what happened 1,000 years before that even? Look at Deuteronomy. Chapter 28, verse 49 and 50, when God is prophesying about Babylon. 1,000 years earlier, it says, the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, swooping down like what? An eagle. And this lion has eagle's feathers. Now, the eagle is representative of pride and its loftiness. This is what Babylon was known as. Well, now comes Persia, the bear, in Daniel 7:5. It says, I saw another beast like a bear. It was lifted up on one side. 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And they said to it, get up and take much flesh. Well, it so happens the Persian Empire controlled Assyria, Babylon, and the Medes. Those are the 3 areas that it controlled. And then after this comes Greece in Daniel 7:6. After this, I saw another beast like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings like those of a bird. We know those 4 wings represent the 4 generals that took place after Alexander the Great had died. It says the beast had 4 heads. The power of a ruler was given to it. So again, the 4 wings, the 4 heads are all representative of those 4 generals. Now, Alexander the Great, you know when he first conquered, he was only 20 years old. He reigned 12 years. He died at the young age of 32. And so then his reign was taken over by his 4 generals, who were the extension, followed by the little horn, which is Antiochus. But let's go back to Daniel 7:7. It says, after this, I saw in my vision of the night, I saw what? A 4th beast. A thing, he calls it a thing. He couldn't describe it. It's undescribable. It was causing fear and very troubling. Full of power and very strong. And it had great iron teeth. Wow, no cavities in that. It took its food, crushing some of it to bits, stomping down the rest with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts before it, and it had what? 10 horns. Isn't that interesting? Look at Daniel 7:8. I was watching the horns with care, and I saw another coming up among them, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. You know, it's interesting. The feet has 10 horns. And how many toes do you have? 10 toes. Okay, in other words, they're an extension. These are extensions. And now, look at Daniel 7:23 and 24. It says, thus he said, the 4th beast will be the 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be diverse from all the kingdoms. It'll devour the whole earth. It'll tread it down. It'll break it in pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom shall 10 kings arise. Okay, now here's the thing. How many of you realize there are like 70 facets? You can't say there's only one correct interpretation. Plus, if you have to remember, that which has happened is that which will happen again. So when I'm about to give you one definition of these 10 toes, that doesn't mean it's the only definition of the 10 toes. This will happen again. But did you know, how many of you know that that fourth kingdom in one sense referred to the Roman Empire that destroyed the temple in 70 AD, right? Well, guess what? There are exactly 10 emperors of Rome until the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. You had Julius Caesar was the first one, and then Caesar Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galbo, Otho, Aulus, Vitellius, and then Vespasian. Vespasian is the one who was the 10th toe who destroyed the temple. Now, of course, his son, he had two sons, Titus and Domitian, who were brothers. Titus ruled, and then Domitian. They were sons of Vespasian. But from the first Roman king to the one that destroyed the temple, there were 10 Roman kings, which I found interesting. Now, let's go now to the Hebrew Heritage Bible again, the New Testament, and let's look at Revelation 12, verse 3 and 4. Let's compare Revelation to Daniel. Here it says, another marvel appeared in heaven. Okay, so remember I told you what's happening on earth is also happening in heaven? Okay, so we have to look at both. And it says, now look, there was a monstrous dragon. Ablaze with fire came out, having 7 heads with how many horns? 10 horns. On his heads, moreover, appeared 7 kingly crowns. His tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven, dashed them to the ground. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she completed delivery, he would be able to swallow up her child. But now here's what's interesting. In Revelation, we see a wonder is taking place where? In heaven, and it's a dragon. And then where does that dragon get sent? He gets sent to earth, and he comes up out of the sea like the nations. Look at Revelation 13, 1 and 2. Then, right after he is thrown down, this dragon is thrown down, it says from heaven, it says, I saw a beast coming up out of what? The sea. And what does it say? It has 10 horns and 7 heads. That's just like the dragon. So the dragon is in heaven, and then it gets thrown down to earth. Now the dragon is coming up out of the sea, and it has on his horns 10 kingly crowns. Upon his head a blasphemous name was inscribed. The beast which I saw resembled what? A leopard. And then it says his feet were like the feet of what? There's the bear. And he has the mouth like what? There's the lion. He's seeing the same thing Daniel saw, but going in the other direction because he's at the other direction of history. This is fascinating to me as I look at this and look at that mouth. He's got a big mouth. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and immense authority. Well, let's look at Revelation 17, 3 through 5. He carries me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast covered with what? Blasphemous names, having what? 7 heads and 10 horns. Wow, this is what they're talking about in Revelation 12 and 13. It's the same thing. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, lavishly attired with gold, precious stones, pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. On her forehead was inscribed a name. Mystery who? That goes right back. There's Babylon again. Okay, it's taking us back. One's looking forward, one's looking back. And she's the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations in the earth. Let's go back to Daniel 7, verse 9 and 10. And what's interesting is we just got done reading how the dragon was giving this beast on earth his throne. Well, now what do we find? Daniel 7, 9 and 10, I beheld until thrones were placed, and one that was the Ancient of Days did set. His raiment was white as snow, the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, the wheels burning with fire. A fiery stream is issuing and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered to him. And look at this. 10,000 times 10,000 were standing before him. The judgment is set, and what? The books are open. This is a courtroom setting. Okay, and now these books are being opened. This is in the book of Daniel. Okay, Well, let's go to Revelation and look at verse 5 and 11 and 12. John says, I beheld and I heard the voice of many angels around what? The throne. And there's the beast and the elders, and the number of them was what? 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, all saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. This is the same setting that Daniel saw. And it goes on, and look at Revelation 20, verse 12 and 13. And I saw the dead, both those of great importance and those of little importance, all standing before the throne. And what happens? The books were open. This is exactly what Daniel saw. This is a Rosh Hashanah event, guys. This is going to happen some year between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. For 10 days, all mankind will be judged. The books will be closed on Yom Kippur. It says there's another book that is open. It's the book of life. The dead were judged by the accounting of the items entered into the books, all according to their actions, not their motivations. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. Death and hell surrendered over their dead which were in them. They were all judged, each one according to his intentions. No. According to his actions. One of the commentaries I read said concerning the final judgment, when even the wicked dead are raised, they asked, why are the wicked dead raised? And they said it's so they have to watch the reward of the righteous take place. Well, guess what? The wicked and the righteous, they say, will be rewarded not just by their actions currently, but the effect of their action on the next generation. If you've done something to someone and hurt someone and it affects them, then how does it affect them, affecting their children and affecting their children? It's the same thing. Look at what blessing Moses is going to get because of every generation throughout history his actions have affected. So we have to realize when we do things, our actions literally can have an effect that will ripple through many generations. Your reward or punishment is going to be based on the effects of your actions even throughout all of history. In one sense, fortunately for us, the Lord's coming soon. We don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, it's bad if you're doing good and you want more blessings. But I thought that was interesting that comment would be made. We'll be rewarded even on how our actions affect the next generation as well. Okay, Daniel 7, 11 and 12. I beheld at that time because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke. Isn't that just what we were talking about? He's got a big fat mouth. And I beheld even till the beast was slain and its body destroyed, and it was given to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. And then here we are, back to Daniel 7, 13 and 14. Now he sees in his night visions, behold, there comes with the clouds of heaven one like unto a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days. He was brought near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all the people, nations, and language would serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which will not be destroyed. And even the Jewish people in all of their commentaries say this is King Messiah. They know that this refers to King Messiah. I think it's fascinating. He doesn't rise from the sea. He comes with the clouds of heaven. Wow. Daniel, talking about the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. What does Revelation chapter 1, verse 7 say? Take notice of this. He's coming with what? The clouds. Every eye will see him, and so will those who pierced him. All the nations of the earth will mourn over him. Even so it is to be. Amen. Okay, Daniel 7, 15 and 16. And as for me, Daniel, my spirit was pained in the midst of my body, and the visions in my head affrighted me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and I asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made me know the interpretation of the things. In verse 17 through 20, It says, these great beasts, which are four kings that will rise out of the earth. The saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I desire to know the truth concerning that fourth beast, which was diverse from all the rest of them, exceedingly terrible, whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet, and concerning those 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 fell, even that horn that had eyes and a big fat mouth, that spoke great things, whose appearance was greater than that of its fellows. You know, one of the Jewish commentaries I read concerning this horn or nation that has eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, they're saying this nation or this person is going to win the battles through cunning and basically fake news. Okay, this is going to be won not on the battlefield with military. It's going to be won through persuasion of his mouth and the eyes of understanding, knowing how to conquer without a military. Now, Daniel 7:21-23. He says, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until that Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came, and then the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be diverse from all the other kingdoms. It'll devour the whole earth, tread it down, and break it in pieces. And then verse 24-26. As for those 10 horns, out of this kingdom will 10 kings arise. Another will arise after them, and he'll be diverse from the former, and he'll put down 3 kings. And what is he going to do? He's going to speak words against the Most High. He'll wear out the saints of the Most High, and he's going to think to change the seasons and the laws, and they will be given into his hand until a time and times and half a time. But the judgment will sit, his dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and to be destroyed unto the very end. Our closing verse here now, Daniel 7:27-28. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven is going to be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Do I hear an hallelujah there? Their kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. All dominions shall serve and obey them. Here is the end of the matter. And as for me, Daniel, my thoughts much affrighted me, and my countenance was changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. All right. So there we go.